Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. America has ended its longest war. The United States has completed its military withdrawal and has evacuated all of its soldiers from Afghanistan. The last American troops in the country boarded a C-17 military aircraft, ending the U.S. mission in Kabul. We'll get you the full details of the American exit and what it means. First, the day's top headlines. Briefing the media after the US exit, the Taliban pledges it will rebuild Afghanistan, and it invites foreign investors, assuring them a safe and stable business environment.
And rather vow that they would be repairing all of these.
WION reports from Ground Zero in Kabul as members of the Taliban take control of the city's international airport after the US handed over the all-important installation. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid congratulates Afghans, calling the American exit a defeat and a lesson for other invaders. This as celebratory gunfire rings out across Kabul. India's envoy in Doha meets the Taliban leadership and seeks safety and the early return of stranded Indians, and raises concerns over the use of Afghan soil by terror groups and anti-Indian activities. The Taliban says it will address the issues positively. And Britain's Foreign Secretary is denying charges that the UK insisted on keeping the Abbey Gate at Kabul airport open before Thursday's explosion killed scores of people, including 13 US troops. Reports citing a leaked Pentagon document claim the US wanted to close the gate on the afternoon of August the 26th. The war in Afghanistan began just after the attacks of September the 11th, back in 2001, when the Taliban controlled the country. 2 decades later, as the United States ended its longest war by withdrawing all its troops from Afghanistan, the Taliban is back in power. The last US C-17 military aircraft loaded with US soldiers left under the cover of darkness. And this ghostly image of Major General Chris Donahue, commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, is set to become an iconic picture for the history books. Carrying his rifle down by his side, Major General Donahue became the last US soldier to board the final flight out of Hamid Karzai International Airport. The image, taken with a night vision device from a side window of a C-17, was released by the Pentagon. Donahue appears to be moving briskly, his face expressionless, wearing full combat gear with night vision goggles atop his helmet and his weapon by his side. These visuals that you see now on your screen are from the year 1989, when the Red Army made its final exit from Afghanistan. Soviet General Boris Gromov led an armoured column across the Friendship Bridge to Uzbekistan. The two images offer quite a contrast. On the one hand, an American general leaving in the middle of the night. On the other, Russian General Gromov walking across the bridge in broad daylight with a bouquet of red and white flowers. The US and Soviet withdrawals from Afghanistan were conducted under very different circumstances. When Russia's Red Army left, a pro-Moscow communist government was still in power in Kabul. The army fought for 3 more years. In an almost 10-year war, the Soviet Union lost over 14,000 soldiers, and it cost Moscow billions of rubles. Days before the American withdrawal deadline, the US-backed Afghan government had already capitulated, and Kabul had fallen to the Taliban. America's longest war took the lives of nearly 2,500 US troops, an estimated 240,000 Afghans, and cost some $2 trillion of taxpayer money. The final US evacuation of Kabul will be judged by how many people were brought out and how many were left behind. But Donahue, his comrades, and the tens of thousands of Afghans will carry harrowing images from America's chaotic last days in Kabul. Parents passing babies to troops across razor wire. Afghans falling from the wheel well of a plane that had taken off. And the aftermath of an Islamic State suicide bomb attack outside the airport that left over 180 Afghans and 13 US soldiers dead. Of course, many people all over the world believe the US exit from Afghanistan has been hasty and possibly also humiliating. Washington and its NATO allies carried out massive but chaotic airlift operations over the past 2 weeks, bringing an end to 2 decades of American involvement in the country. Shortly, US President Joe Biden will address the American people to try and justify his decision not to extend the evacuation mission beyond the August 31st deadline.
In the dead of the night in Afghanistan, a minute before midnight, local time on August 31st, the United States completed its mission and ended its 20-year war in Afghanistan. A war that will be remembered for colossal failures, unfulfilled promises, and a frantic final exit. This is Major General Chris Donahue, Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne Corps and the last American soldier to leave Afghanistan on a giant C-17.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. Look, there's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that. It's a tough situation.
The war started and ended with the hardline Islamist Taliban in power. Ironically, the US exit depended heavily on trusting the Taliban to provide security around the airport against the threat posed by the Islamic State terror group. The war on terror in Afghanistan was declared after the 9/11 terror attacks. Since then, Afghan civilians and security forces have long taken the brunt of the failures. With tens of thousands killed and many more wounded, costs to Washington were immense too. 2,356 US military deaths and almost an overall financial cost of $2.3 trillion. The end began under President Donald Trump. In 2016, Trump promised to end the forever wars. In February 2020, Washington committed to withdrawing by May 1st this year. Taliban agreed to enter peace negotiations with Kabul and not to attack American troops in the meantime. They instead stepped up their political campaign against the Ashraf Ghani government. When Biden came to power, the official US troop presence was down to 2,500. He set August 31st as the final date of withdrawal. But the end came faster than Washington expected. The Taliban marched into the Afghan capital with no resistance. The country's own president, Ashraf Ghani, fled, leaving his citizens to fend for themselves. Harrowing scenes unfolded across Kabul. In a desperate bid to flee, tens of thousands of Afghans rushed to the Kabul airport. Many ran behind planes on the tarmac. Some even clung on to US planes as they took off. Only to fall from the sky. Since the 14th of August, the United States has evacuated over 5,500 of its citizens. A small number of American citizens have chosen to stay in Afghanistan. Blinken has vowed relentless efforts to help Americans and others leave Afghanistan in the coming days.
So here's our plan for the days and weeks ahead. First, we built a new team to help lead this new mission. As of today, we've suspended our diplomatic presence in Kabul and transferred our operations to Doha, Qatar, which will soon be formally notified to Congress. Given the uncertain security environment and political situation in Afghanistan, it was the prudent step to take. Second, we will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose.
United States has also cleared its stance on engagement with the Taliban.
Every step we take will be based not on what a Taliban-led government says, but what it does to live up to its commitments. The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our message is any legitimacy and any support will have to be earned.
Washington has suspended its diplomatic presence in Kabul and shifted its operations to Qatar. The United States has called it a new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan. But the beginning of this new chapter is ignominious, to say the least. The United States failed to defeat the Taliban. It failed to establish a functioning democracy in Afghanistan, failed to thwart the spread of Islamist extremist groups in the region, and it even failed to leave on its own terms. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, here in the United States, there are fresh, grim numbers for President Biden to digest, suggesting the extent to which his presidency has been damaged by the botched military withdrawal from Afghanistan. A Reuters Ipsos poll completed just before the last US troops flew out of the country shows less than 40% of Americans approve of President Biden's handling of the crisis. 49% said the US military should stay in Afghanistan until all American citizens and Afghan allies have been evacuated. When asked which party has a better plan for handling the war on terror, 29% said Republicans, while 26% said Democrats, giving the Republicans a 3-point edge. 4 years ago, ahead of the 2018 midterm elections in the US, Republicans had a 7-point advantage over Democrats when people were asked the same question. 10% in this new poll, 10% in that old poll, mostly blamed former President George W. Bush, who ordered the invasion of the country 2 decades ago, and 9% blamed former President Donald Trump, who negotiated a swift withdrawal of US forces last year under the 2020 withdrawal agreement. Trump began to sharply reduce troop levels, and by the time Biden took office in January, there were only about 2,500 US troops left in Afghanistan. From a one-time peak of 100,000 at the war's zenith, another 30% blamed a slew of other actors in the region, including the Taliban, the Afghan military, US military leaders and ISIS-K, the terrorist group that claimed responsibility for last week's bombing at Kabul airport. Washington says it will now explore diplomatic options to evacuate the remaining Americans and the many thousands of eligible Afghans who did not make it out of the country. The United States and its allies have flown out more than 123,000 people since August the 14th, including their own citizens and Afghans who helped them over 20 years of war. On the first day of the Taliban taking over at Kabul airport after the complete departure of the US military, the airport carries a deserted look. WION's reporter Anas Malik in Kabul brings us this special report as he enters the military side of the city's airport, which was under US control.
We're entering the military side of the Kabul airport. From the civilian side to the military side, we're being escorted as well. And This gate ahead, the car that you see right in front, is the one that leads into the military side. Probably one of those moments for the Taliban that they have only been thinking of, and today is D-Day, when the Taliban are now ceased to have control over the entire country, including the airports, those areas which were earlier deemed to be no-go areas.
Signs of US troops are everywhere in a now empty hangar. You can see the US has left behind a host of things, from relatively simple items like a coffee machine and some pens, all the way to destroyed helicopters.
I'm standing outside a hangar that says, "Warning, armed aircraft inside." But what is it in this remaining hangar inside? Let's just have a look. This is a big empty hangar right now. It has some operational things that have been left behind in haste. You'd see cables, you'd see a coffee maker that is there that has been left abandoned, some desks, some walkie-talkie sets, seats as well, plenty of screws and accessories, a medevac stretch bed, probably you see sleeping bags as well lying there on the floor, and additionally plenty of pens that you'd find. These are classic grip handles, non-staples. Looks like this was perhaps converted into a makeshift hospital as well, but by and large the sign outside read that it used to have an active armed aircraft inside over here, which looks like this hangar now gives a pretty much abandoned field, things that might have been left in haste. You see stretchers over there as well, the staircase that can potentially lead to the aircraft's hedge as well, the fighter aircraft's hedge as well. So lots of stuff over here that has been left behind by the Americans, and which are now in control of the Taliban.
The domestic side of the airport too is hauntingly empty in the daylight. Once teeming with desperate Afghans trying to flee, there is no sign of crowds now. Suitcases and clothes strewn around the area give away the mass exodus which took place.
Standing outside the domestic terminal of Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport, the barbed wires indicate that this is a no-entry zone. This is now entirely under the control of the Afghan Taliban. Be that be the civilian side, be that be the military side, the entire 100% control of the airport's internal security, runways, hangars, whatever that has been left behind is in control of the Taliban, and the Taliban are now in charge.
Now, in other news today, scientists in South Africa are monitoring a new variant of COVID-19 which has an unusually high mutation rate. According to the National Institute for Communicable Diseases, the frequency of the new variant has increased in recent months. It's known as C.1.2. It was flagged last week by the KwaZulu-Natal Research and Innovation Sequencing Platform in a study that is yet to be scientifically reviewed. The majority of South Africa's COVID-19 cases are currently caused by the Delta variant, which was first identified in India. C.1.2 caught scientists' attention because its mutation is almost twice as fast as that observed in other variants. The variant has been detected in less than 3% of genomes sequenced since it first emerged in May. The frequency remains relatively low. NICD scientists say that C.1.2 is only present at very low levels and that it is too early to predict how it might evolve. A researcher from the NICD said, and I quote, "At this stage, we do not have experimental data to confirm how it reacts in terms of sensitivity to antibodies. We have considerable confidence that the vaccines that are being rolled out in South Africa will continue to protect against severe illness and death." So far, C.1.2 has been detected in all of South Africa's provinces. It has also been detected in China, Mauritius, New Zealand and the UK. However, C.1.2 does not qualify at the moment as a variant of interest or variant of concern. Highly transmissible Delta and Beta variants, which were first detected in South Africa, do fall into that category. South Africa is the hardest hit African country due to the pandemic. So far, it has recorded 2.7 million COVID-19 cases. The Beta variant drove the second wave of infections in December and January. The country is now grappling with a third wave dominated by the Delta variant. And that's all we have for you today on this edition of WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks. President Biden speaks to the American people in a few hours' time about the crisis in Afghanistan. We'll bring you that and all the day's latest updates from Afghanistan and the rest of the world. Stay with WION. World is One.
Many other
this is right, Arab. We're entering the military side of the Kabul airport. One of those moments for the Taliban that they have only been thinking of, and today is D-Day, when the Taliban are now ceased to have control over the entire country. I'm standing outside a hangar that says, "Warning, armed aircraft inside." But what is it in this remaining hangar inside? Let's just have a look. The Taliban here claim and rather vow that they would be repairing all of these